One day round robin. I am in a group of 6 players. We're going to play against everyone for a total of 5 games in one day. Time control is 30 minutes plus 30 seconds of increments, which is valid for classical. The goal is to reach 1800 FIDE right now, so let's see if I manage to do that. So this is my first game, my opponent is rated 1400, let's see what happens. First of all, I have to say I thought this was a tournament with people that were rated from 1700 to 1800, so obviously I didn't understand anything about this tournament. So basically the limit is 1800, because if you are more than 1800 FIDE, 30 plus 30 is not valid for your standard rating. I don't know why, but these are the rules. If you want to gain points after 1800, you have to play 60 plus 30, 90 plus 30, something like that. Also, I changed my repertoire. Now I'm trying to play the close Sicilian against the Sicilian, obviously. I change Sunlimes pretty much everywhere. So I play d4, obviously. This is probably not going to change, probably. And I was prepared pretty much for the Sicilian and d5, because you have to understand something. Online, it's okay, like people play everything. In tournaments, people just play the Sicilian or e5. That's it. Pretty much, like 90% of the time is like that. So I was mostly prepared against them. b6. Of course, my opponent plays the Owen defense, which is okay. Owen defense in classical time. Let's see, I mean, it is a good surprise, although you have to know theory, because let's say you don't know theory, I don't know theory too, but I'm stronger than you. I already got a better position, like this is already +1, so I don't know, I wouldn't play the Owen defense. e4 d4, what to do now? Obviously my opponent replies with bishop b7, and now the most played move is bishop d3, so I played it. It's not like a no theory, and no, this is fine. And let's say they attack your bishop one more time. Let's say even with f5, there is always queen e2 as an idea, so it is pretty fine. He replied with e6, with I don't know d5 ideas, which are not the most clever since you think at the bishop. And at this point I replied with knight on f3, just developing a piece. I want to castle as soon as possible and then play something like c4, launch every pawn towards my opponent and win. He replied with c5. Now at this point I cannot really play c4. I mean, I could play c4, but then you take, my knight take, I don't know, doesn't feel that good. My knight on d4 doesn't even make that much of a sense. If anything, it is a target. So I decided to play c3, which by the way is the most played move, and just makes sense because if you take, I have a huge center, so you cannot take probably, and then fine, I'm solid. I also have a ton of space. I'm going to castle and see, and launch another attack probably. So he replied with c4. Now c4 is no good, and I knew that, not because this was on my notes, but because it doesn't really make a ton of sense. This is just a weakness now. Like, you don't see this move often. Obviously, I can take. I cannot take. If I take, you have this. But after I play bishop on c2, this is just a weak pawn. You have to play b5 in order to defend it. I might play a4. You just gave me a weakness, and this doesn't do a lot. Like, my bishop now just lied. And if anything, I could actually push, and this pawn is going to be supported by the queen. So yeah, c4 didn't make too much of a sense, I would say. At this point, he replied with knight on f6. So I could play knight on d2, or even e5, but let's say I play e5, just, I don't know. I wasn't sure about e5. I just opened the bishop to, I don't know, I didn't feel really okay playing e5 or knight d2. I thought that playing queen on e2 was pretty clever. Apparently it's inaccurate, I don't really lose the advantage. But I mean, queen on e2 just makes sense. Pressure on this file where there is, you know, my opponent king, so this has to make a sense. If you play this, I might have some, I don't know, he takes d5 idea. I'm also attacking the pawn while defending, so yeah, this was a clever move, I would say. At this point he replied with d5, so what can I do? I could take, but at this point I thought, If I take, obviously you cannot take this way, you might want to take with the bishop or with the knight. Now if you take with the knight you lose this pawn, so you probably have to take with the bishop. Although, now that my opponent doesn't have the d5 square, I can just play e5. And what can you do? If you play knight on e4, I mean, it looks super wrong. I would never play it. Knight on g4, same, I just play h3, you go back, and if you want to castle, I just take the knight, and yeah, good luck surviving. So probably the only move you have at this point is something like, I don't know, knight on d7, apparently knight on g8 is playable. But knight on e4 is the best move anyway, and I thought it was super wrong. It is. I mean, it is, but because this idea was wrong. Playing knight on e4 is not that bad, because let's say I take now, you actually have time to defend, and to be honest, it's also quite difficult. Let's say this happens and I play knight on d2, you always have the ideas, and if I take, you're going to take this. So in order to prevent this, I was like, well, I don't really have to take now. The knight is not going anywhere. The knight, objectively speaking, is not going anywhere. It can just stay there. And it is a huge target. When I want, I'm going to take it. I want to prevent this. I'm just going to castle. I'm just going to castle. Next move, bishop take. You play this, knight d2, I win a pawn. As simple as that. Now he replied with bishop on e7, and now I could still wait, and apparently even knight b on d2 is a move, but it was like, listen, I'm going to win a pawn. I'm just going to win a pawn, why not? So I took the knight, he decided to take, obviously, and now the knight goes back on d2, I'm attacking two pawns. You cannot defend both of them. So apparently one move, one playable move is b5. Let's say you play b5, I'm going to take anyway. Let's say you play this, I don't care, I can just defend the knight. So I'm going to be up a pawn anyway. My opponent decided to play a trickier move, queen on d5. The idea was, let's say he takes with the knight, which is the best move apparently, but let's say this happens, I have this idea, e3. The problem is that in this case the knight I can defend. But I was like, listen, what if I take with the queen? Which once again is apparently inaccurate. And I had to calculate a really cool line. So first of all, you don't have to take, and let's say you play e3. At this point, if I take, you might think, well, what happens if I take here knight? The fact is that this loses, because despite everything, it's good that you're going to make a queen, but this is not enough. First of all, I could even give you a check, but I mean, I can just take the queen, everything is hanging, and I'm up on off material. So you're not going to win, so I defended from e3. This move made in fact sense, despite the fact it was inaccurate. Now my opponent replied with bishop on a6, and now I decided to take the queen, and guess what? I'm up a pawn. Now it's clear that my opponent has quite a good control in the center, but it is also true that I have ideas like f3, so it's not that simple. So I played rook on e1, obviously the rook was under attack, and he replied with f6. Now f6 is a clever move, I have to say, because let's say I take, you take with the pawn. If I play f3, you always have the idea of playing f5. I can take, I can definitely take, but now it's not that easy to win these pawns. So this happened, but for some reason my opponent decided to take with the bishop. Now taking with the bishop is a bad move. It doesn't really make a ton of sense. I guess it means the fact that I'm just winning a pawn after this. I mean, the pawn is pinned, so I can just play f3, the attackers, and what can you do? I mean, you can add a defender, but that doesn't really change anything. I'm just going to win a pawn. So he decided to castle instead, and now he's going for activity. The problem is that this is a classical game, and I'm up two central pawns. I don't care if you have activity, I'm just going to take them. Two central pawns is too much not to take them. In fact, it's +3 because there has to be a way to defend. First of all, I'm also attacking the bishop. If I take the bishop, I take the bishop with check, so my opponent has to be careful. So probably you have to retreat it. But my opponent decided to play knight on e7. The idea is that if you take, you actually get more active with your pieces. And to be honest, I was thinking about this, and I was like, that's actually true. If I take, I might give my opponent a bit too much activity, because he's going to double rooks. Keep in mind that if you manage to double rooks and play rook on f1, it's going to be checkmate, because the bishop covers this square. So I take, rook take, checkmate. And that means I have to be pretty careful. Also, let's say I manage to defend with knight on f3, you can just play bishop on b7 and have 3 attackers on it. So it's not that simple. For this reason, I decided that instead of taking, I should have developed pieces, and I found a really clever move. Bishop g5. The point of bishop g5 is that now, I don't care if you retreat the bishop or not, I always have the chance to take it. If you take now, I'm going to take with the knight, and you still have to wait sometimes in order to double rooks. My knight gets more active, and I should be fine. He decided to play rook a8 to e8, and now just keep developing pieces. I could take, I don't care. Knight b1 on d2, I'm developing everything now, rooks are connected. At this point I can take, at this point I'm not scared about anything, I just develop pieces, I'm fine. My goal right now is trading pieces, and especially the pair of bishops. The pair of bishop is super strong. I get to play the pair of bishop right now because this bishop is not going anywhere, so I'm fine. He replied with bishop take on g5, knight take on g5, and now the knight goes on f6. He has a pretty active knight. What to do now? Now you have to be careful. Because let's say, I don't know, I put this knight on f3 and everything. He has knight on d5. Knight on d5 and he gets in. I can't allow him to get in. And keep in mind, I have 2 central pawns. It is time to use them. c4. c4 is the best move. The point of c4 is that the knight is not getting on this square. The knight could get on h5, but I have the ideas. The knight is not going anywhere. You can attack my pawn, I can defend it, I don't care. So at this point, the knight goes on g4, another square where it could go. But now, I'm not scared. I saw this move and I was like, well, now I'm completely defended because I have a really good defensive resource. Knight g goes on e4. The idea is that the knight is blocking the rook, so you cannot play knight on e3, I can just take it. And you cannot even play knight on f2, because once again, I can just take it. You're not going to win any sort of material, you cannot sacrifice, doesn't make any sense. You have absolutely nothing in this position, which is completely winning. My opponent played rook on f4, which is the losing move. I played h3, and my opponent resigned. Because if your knight goes back, wherever it goes, let's say goes on h6, I can sacrifice the knight, rook take, and you lose, and it's change. You have already down 2 pawns. I trade material, and this is a really easy win. So my opponent resigned. I won the first game. I played with 97% accuracy, despite the fact I didn't know the opening, like no one plays the Owen defense, but to be honest, there is a reason. The Owen defense is not good, especially for classical. The fact is that, okay, you surprise me, but unless you play something like a crazy aggressive line where I could go wrong, if you don't do that and you allow me to take space and develop pieces, you are going to lose. So you can play it, but if you are really prepared. Obviously my opponent didn't play the best move. But yeah, this was the first game. I'm really happy with this one. Finally, I played a good game. But yeah, that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to leave a like and subscribe. And see you soon with the second round.